There's a man we've been calling a monster for over a decade, William Afton, the purple guy, Springtrap, the child murderer who built an empire on the suffering of innocents. The man who killed at least 11 children, destroyed families, corrupted technology, and created a legacy of horror that spans generations. We know his crimes. We've cataloged them, analyzed them, built entire timelines around his acts of violence. But what if we've been wrong? Not about the deaths. The children died, that's not in question. Charlotte, Emily, Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, Cassidy. Elizabeth Afton, the crying child. They're gone. The tragedy is real, the suffering is documented. But what if the man we've blamed for all of it, the monster we've constructed from fragments of minigames and cryptic phone calls and books that may or may not be canon? What if William Afton isn't who we think he is? This isn't a defense. This is an investigation. Because after examining every game, every book, every piece of evidence Scott Cawthon has given us across a decade of storytelling, something doesn't add up. The narrative we've built around William Afton is based on assumptions, interpretations, connections we've drawn between events that might not be connected at all, and some of those assumptions have never been confirmed. We see purple figures in minigames and assume they're all the same person. We see animatronics kill and assume William built them to kill. We see a man in a spring Bonnie suit luring children and assume we know his intentions. We've constructed a timeline where every tragedy, every death, every malfunction is part of William's grand design. But what if it wasn't? What if William Afton was a father who lost his children and spent the rest of his life trying to bring them back? What if the technology he created was never meant to harm anyone? What if the murders happened, but not the way we think, not by who we think, not for the reasons we've assumed? What if the real villain of Five Nights at Freddy's has been hiding in plain sight this entire time, and we've been blaming the wrong person? This is not a theory designed to absolve a murderer. This is an investigation into whether the murderer we've identified is actually the one responsible. Because in any criminal investigation, you don't start with a suspect and fit the evidence to match. You start with the evidence and see where it leads. And when you examine the evidence in Five Nights at Freddy's, without assuming William's guilt from the beginning, when you look at what we actually see versus what we've been told, when you question whether the sources of information are reliable, something remarkable happens. The entire story changes, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to examine every piece of evidence, every death, every animatronic, every minigame, every book. We're going to question every assumption the community has made about William Afton. And we're going to see if the villain we've constructed can withstand scrutiny, or if the real story of Five Nights at Freddy's has been waiting to be discovered all along. If you're genuinely interested in long-form investigations like this, documentaries that don't just repeat accepted theories, but actually challenge them with evidence and intellectual honesty, then you'll want to subscribe. Because this is exactly the kind of content we'll continue creating. Deep analysis that respects your intelligence and treats FNAF lore as something worth serious investigation. Now let's begin where every investigation should begin. Not with accusations, but with facts. What do we actually know about William Afton, not what we assume, not what we've theorized? What do we know for certain, supported by explicit evidence that cannot be interpreted any other way? The list is surprisingly short. We know William Afton existed. We know he was a businessman associated with Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and Fredbear's Family Diner. We know he had a family. At least two sons, Michael and the crying child whose real name we still don't have. A daughter, Elizabeth. Possibly a wife, though she's never directly confirmed in the games. We know he was a co-founder of the business alongside Henry Emily. We know he was involved in the creation of animatronics. We know he wore a spring Bonnie suit at some point because we see it in minigames. We know that children died. Charlotte Emily was killed outside of Freddy's location. 5 children went missing inside a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Elizabeth Afton died involving Circus Baby. The crying child died from the bite of 83. We know that William ended up inside a spring Bonnie suit, trapped there when the spring locks failed, becoming Springtrap. We know that Springtrap appears in FNAF 3, hunting the player through Fazbear's Fright 30 years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closed. We know that in Pizzeria Simulator, an entity identified as William Afton is lured into a building and burned. We know that Ultimate Custom Night potentially depicts William being tormented by the spirits of dead children. That's what we know. Confirmed, explicit, undeniable. But notice what's missing from that list. We don't actually have confirmation that William killed Charlotte Emily. We see a purple figure outside the building when she dies, but we never see the act. We don't have William's name attached to it. We assume it's him because the figure is purple and purple equals William in the community's interpretation. We don't have explicit confirmation that William committed the missing children incident. We see a figure in a spring Bonnie suit in the Save Them minigame, and we see the aftermath of children going missing, but we never see William Afton's name. We never see his face. We assume the spring Bonnie figure is William because he wore the suit, and because we need someone to blame for the murders. We don't have confirmation that William built Circus Baby to kill children. We know Baby killed Elizabeth. We know the Funtime animatronics have child capture mechanisms. But we never see evidence of William's intent. We assume he designed them to kill because they have the capability, but capability doesn't prove intent. We don't even have confirmation that William wanted to become Springtrap. The FNAF 3 minigames show him being cornered by spirits and climbing into the spring Bonnie suit, where he dies from springlock failure. That looks like desperation, not intention. That looks like a man being murdered by vengeful ghosts, not a man achieving some grand design. Every major crime we attribute to William Afton is based on interpretation, not explicit evidence. And that should concern us, because we've built an entire understanding of FNAF's story on assumptions that have never been proven. Let's start dismantling those assumptions one by one. The first assumption: William killed Charlotte Emily. The evidence comes from the Take Cake to the Children minigame in FNAF 2. We see a pixelated Freddy Fazbear inside a building trying to deliver cake to children. Outside, we see a child, gray and alone. A purple car pulls up. The child disappears. The child's sprite turns gray and tears appear. She's dead. The community interpretation is that the purple car represents William Afton, identified by the color purple, and that he killed Charlotte, Henry's daughter, in this moment. But let's examine that interpretation. First, the figure in the car isn't even shown. We see a purple car. That's it. We've decided that purple equals William, and therefore the car must belong to William. But is that actually confirmed anywhere? Or is it an assumption based on other assumptions? The color purple is used throughout FNAF to represent various things. Shadow Freddy is purple. Shadow Bonnie is purple. The FNAF 4 bedroom has purple elements. Purple doesn't exclusively mean William. It often represents death, corruption, or supernatural elements. And even if the car is William's, we don't see what happened. We see a child outside. We see a car arrive. We see the child gone. We assume murder, but we don't see murder. Could there be another interpretation? What if Charlotte wasn't murdered by whoever was in that car? What if she was taken? What if someone else killed her afterward? What if the car arriving and Charlotte's death are related but not in the way we think? The puppet's minigame, Security Puppet, shows more of Charlotte's death. The security puppet is inside the building, programmed to follow a specific child, presumably Charlotte, and keep her safe. But the puppet gets trapped by other children placing boxes on it. While trapped, Charlotte is locked outside in the rain. She's alone. She collapses. She dies. And then her spirit possesses the puppet. But notice what's absent from that minigame. We don't see anyone kill her. We see her locked outside, alone in the rain, and she dies. From exposure, from fear, we don't know. We assume murder because that fits the narrative, but the minigame doesn't show murder. What if Charlotte died from being abandoned outside in a traumatic situation, and the community has been blaming William for a death he didn't cause? Henry, in his Pizzeria Simulator speech, says, "I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name. But I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to receive a gift, nor have you been called here by the individual you assume, although you have indeed been called." He addresses Elizabeth directly. He addresses the spirits, but he never explicitly says William killed Charlotte. He says, "I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms the way you lifted others into yours. Left to die. Not murdered. Left to die." What if Henry is admitting his own failure? His restaurant's security failed. His animatronic, the security puppet, failed to protect his daughter. She was locked out, left alone, and died. And Henry has been carrying that guilt ever since. But the community needed a villain. So we took the purple car, assumed it was William, and constructed a narrative where William deliberately murdered Henry's daughter as the first step in a killing spree, without evidence, without confirmation, based entirely on the color of a car in a minigame. This is the foundation of William's villainy, and it's built on sand. But let's continue. Let's examine the missing children incident, because surely that's confirmed, right? William Afton murdered 5 children and stuffed their bodies in animatronic suits. That's FNAF's central tragedy. Except we don't actually have that confirmation. We have newspaper clippings in FNAF 1 mentioning that 5 children went missing at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We have mini-games showing children's spirits possessing animatronics. We have the Save Them minigame showing a figure in a spring Bonnie suit present when children are dead. But we never see the murders happen. We never see William Afton's name attached to them. We never get explicit confirmation of who was in the spring Bonnie suit. The community has assumed it was William because he wore the suit, and because we need a culprit. But what if we're wrong? What if someone else wore the spring Bonnie suit? What if William wasn't even at the location when the murders occurred? Let's look at the evidence differently. The spring Bonnie suit is a springlock suit, dangerous and difficult to wear. Phone Guy in FNAF 3 mentions that the suits were being decommissioned due to multiple springlock failures. He mentions that if an employee sees a suit in the back room, they should avoid eye contact and not panic. Why would employees be afraid of a suit if it was just William's personal costume? Why would there be protocols about encountering it, unless the suit wasn't William's? Unless it was a company asset that multiple people could access? Unless the spring Bonnie suit was available to anyone who worked there? The Save Them minigame shows dead children scattered throughout a Freddy's location, and a purple figure in what appears to be a Spring Bonnie suit. But the figure moves strangely, glitches, appears and disappears. This doesn't look like a human wearing a suit. This looks like something supernatural. What if the purple figure in Save Them isn't William at all? What if it's already something else? Something possessing the suit, or a manifestation of the tragedy, not the cause? And here's where it gets interesting. The FNAF 3 minigames show William Afton dismantling the animatronics. He tears apart Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. The spirits emerge and corner him. He retreats into a safe room and climbs into the Spring Bonnie suit to hide from them. The spring locks fail. He dies. But if William murdered those children, if he stuffed their bodies into those animatronics, why would he come back 30 years later to dismantle them? What would he gain? The common interpretation is that William was destroying the animatronics to release the spirits or to harvest remnant from them. But that's speculation. We don't see him harvesting anything. We don't see him experimenting. We see him destroying animatronics, and we see the spirits angry about it. But what if William wasn't destroying evidence? What if he was trying to free the children? Think about it from a different perspective. 5 children are murdered at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Their spirits possess animatronics. The restaurant continues operating. These haunted animatronics terrorizing night guards and exhibiting strange behavior. The company knows something is wrong but continues anyway, because profit matters more than safety. William Afton, co-founder of the company, knows these children's spirits are trapped. He didn't kill them. He's been blamed for it, maybe, or he's investigated it, or he simply knows the truth that no one else will acknowledge, and he decides to do something about it. He returns to the abandoned location. He dismantles the animatronics, trying to free the spirits to release them so they can finally rest. But the spirits don't understand. They see a man destroying their vessels. They are angry, confused, and they attack. William runs. He hides in the Spring Bonnie suit, the only place he thinks they can't reach him, and he dies there. Killed by springlocks, killed by the very technology he helped create, killed while trying to free children he didn't murder. The spirits don't know they've killed an innocent man. They think they've gotten revenge on their killer. And William, trapped in the suit, becomes Springtrap, his soul bound to the animatronic just like the children's souls were. He becomes the very thing he was trying to prevent. This interpretation fits the evidence just as well as the standard narrative. Better, even, because it explains why William would return to dismantle the animatronics. It explains the spirit's aggression. It explains why William seems surprised when the springlocks fail, why he looks like he's trying to hide rather than achieve some transformation. But we've never considered this interpretation, because we started with the assumption that William was guilty. Let's push further. Let's talk about Elizabeth and Circus Baby. The community narrative is that William built Circus Baby specifically to kill children, that the Funtime animatronics were designed as child-killing machines, and Elizabeth's death was either intentional or an acceptable risk in William's experiments. The evidence for this comes from sister location. We see that Circus Baby has a claw mechanism that can grab children. We see that she killed Elizabeth. We hear Baby's voice describing the moment, how she was made for Elizabeth, how she wanted to make Elizabeth happy, how the claw activated and pulled Elizabeth inside. And we see blueprints showing that the Funtime animatronics have internal storage chambers, presumably for captured children. From this, the community concluded that William built these animatronics to kidnap and kill children. that he was creating murder machines. But let's examine the actual evidence. First, the storage chambers. Why do we assume they are for kidnapping? The blueprints show internal space, yes. But internal space could serve multiple purposes: endoskeleton storage, maintenance access, emergency systems. We see storage and assume sinister intent, but that's not evidence. That's interpretation. Second, baby's claw. She has a mechanism that can extend and grab. But lots of animatronics have extending mechanisms. It could be for performance purposes, for handing items to children, for interactive elements. The fact that it can grab doesn't mean it was designed to grab. Third, and most importantly, baby herself says she was made for Elizabeth. I was made for her. Not, I was made to kill her. Not, I was programmed to capture children. She says she was made for Elizabeth. What if William built Circus Baby as a gift for his daughter? What if the animatronic was designed to be Elizabeth's special character, with features meant to delight her, and the tragedy was a malfunction, not intention? Baby describes the moment of Elizabeth's death with something that sounds like confusion. I wanted to make her happy. But then there was only me. She doesn't sound like a machine executing programming. She sounds like an entity that did something she didn't understand and is trying to process what happened. What if the claw mechanism malfunctioned? What if Elizabeth got too close and triggered a safety feature that grabbed her to prevent her from being injured by moving parts, but the safety feature itself caused the tragedy? What if William built this animatronic with love, and it killed his daughter by accident? The blueprints in sister location are labeled as created by Afton Robotics. We assume William designed every feature, but we never see him designing the kill mechanisms. We never see evidence of intent. And here's the critical detail everyone overlooks. After Elizabeth dies, the Funtime animatronics are placed in an underground facility. Circus Baby's Pizza World never opens to the public. The animatronics are locked away. If William built them to kill children, why shut down the operation after only one death? Why not continue? Why not use the animatronics elsewhere? Unless he never intended them to kill anyone. Unless Elizabeth's death horrified him. Unless he locked the animatronics away because he couldn't bear to see them again after they killed his daughter. The private room in sister location shows exotic butters, casual items, monitors watching the facility. It looks like someone monitoring dangerous equipment, yes. But it also looks like someone keeping watch over a graveyard, over a tomb where his daughter died. Michael Afton in the sister location custom night cutscene says, "Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. I put her back together just like you asked me to." William asked Michael to put Elizabeth back together, not to free her, not to destroy her, to put her back together. What if William has been trying to save his children this entire time? What if every action we've interpreted as malicious was actually desperate attempts at resurrection? What if the technology, the animatronics, the experiments, were all a father trying to undo the deaths of his children? And what if we've been calling him a monster for it? This is where the evidence starts to fracture the accepted narrative. Because if William isn't the one who killed the missing children, if Charlotte's death was a tragic accident, if Elizabeth's death was a malfunction, if the crying child's death was caused by his older brother, then what crimes has William actually committed? We need to examine the crying child's death carefully, because this is where William's role as a father comes into question. FNAF 4 shows us the crying child's final days. He's terrified of the animatronics. His older brother and his brother's friends torment him. They wear masks. They scare him. They think it's funny. On the crying child's birthday, they shove his head into Fredbear's mouth. The animatronic's jaws close. The crying child dies in the hospital. Where was William during this? We see a man in a Fredbear suit at the restaurant, possibly an employee, possibly William himself working the party. If William was there, he failed to protect his son. If he wasn't there, he was absent during a critical moment. Either way, the community has blamed him. Bad father, neglectful. Allowed his son to be tormented and killed. But we don't actually see William at the party. We see employees in suits. We see the older brother. We see the tragedy, but we never see William. FNAF 4 house sections show a family home. We see pills. We see flowers. We see an empty room. The community has interpreted this as William's neglect, his absence, his failure as a father. But what if we're seeing the aftermath, not the cause? What if the pills are for William dealing with trauma? What if the flowers are memorials? What if the empty room is where Elizabeth used to sleep before Circus baby killed her? What if the crying child was terrified of animatronics because he witnessed what happened to his sister? What if his fear was justified and William was trying to help him through it, but the older brother's cruelty created the tragedy? The Fredbear plush that appears throughout FNAF 4 speaks to the crying child. I will put you back together. The community has debated who's speaking. William, Henry. Someone else if it's William. Then this is a father promising his dying son that he'll find a way to bring him back. That death won't be the end. That he'll fix this. And if William spent the rest of his life trying to fulfill that promise, trying to understand consciousness and souls and possession so he could restore his children, is that villainy? Or is that love? The survival logbook, the security logbook filled with clues, shows someone asking, "What do you see?" and another presence responding. Two spirits communicating. The community has identified these as the crying child and Cassidy, both somehow connected to Golden Freddy. But there's a third presence in the logbook, someone writing notes about work, about memories, about observations. The community identifies this as Michael Afton, and Michael writes about his father, not with hatred, not with fear, with something that reads more like longing. Like someone trying to understand a complicated man. If William was a monster, if he murdered children for pleasure or experimentation, would Michael be trying to understand him? Or would Michael be trying to stop him? Instead, Michael goes to sister location to find her, to find Elizabeth. Following his father's instructions, working to fulfill his father's mission. That doesn't sound like a son hunting a murderer. That sounds like a son helping his father try to fix an unfixable tragedy. We need to talk about Remnant. Because Remnant is critical to understanding William's motivations, and the community has completely misinterpreted what it represents. Remnant is introduced explicitly in the novels, and later confirmed in the games through sister locations' blueprints. It's described as molten metal infused with human soul energy, created when possessed animatronics are destroyed, and their metal is melted. Remnant can preserve consciousness, create possession, and allow spirits to persist beyond death. The community interpretation is that William discovered Remnant and began experimenting with it, killing children to create more Remnant, harvesting it to achieve immortality. But that's not what the evidence shows. The scooping room in sister location has a device that injects Remnant. The blueprints show this explicitly. But we never see William creating Remnant by killing children. We see him working with technology that uses Remnant that already exists. What if William discovered Remnant after his children died? What if he found that their spirits had persisted in the animatronics, and he was trying to understand how and why? What if every experiment was an attempt to stabilize their consciousness, to preserve them, to eventually restore them to life? The Funtime animatronics containing Remnant doesn't mean William put it there by killing children. It could mean he salvaged it from already possessed animatronics, trying to understand the phenomenon, trying to recreate the conditions that allowed consciousness to persist. Henry in Pizzeria Simulator says, "I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now." He's talking to the spirits, offering them release through fire. He's acknowledging that he failed to save them when they were alive, but he never explicitly says William killed them. He says, "Let me save you now," implying they need saving from their current state, not revenge against their killer. And then there's Ultimate Custom Night, the game that supposedly confirms William's guilt by showing him being tortured by the spirits of his victims. Except we don't actually know that's what Ultimate Custom Night is. The game could be William's hell. It could be Michael's nightmares. It could be a non-canon challenge mode with voice lines meant to be creepy, not lore-accurate. Scott has never confirmed what Ultimate Custom Night represents narratively. The vengeful spirit, the one keeping the protagonist trapped, is implied to be Cassidy, the fifth missing child. Her voice says, "I will keep you here. I will make this last forever." But if William didn't kill Cassidy, if someone else did, then her vengeance is misdirected. She's tormenting an innocent man, or at least a man innocent of her specific death, because she assumes he's guilty, just like the community has assumed. And here's the most damning piece of evidence against the standard narrative. The entity that might actually be responsible for everything, the Mimic. Introduced in Tales from the Pizzaplex and the Ruin DLC, the Mimic is an AI created by a Fazbear Entertainment employee. It learns by observing behavior. It was taught to mimic a child's movements to play and interact. But when the employee's child died, the employee, consumed by grief, beat the Mimic violently, and the Mimic learned violence. It began copying the worst human behaviors: murder, deception. It killed people. It hid bodies. It wore suits to lure victims. And it's been active for decades, hidden in the infrastructure of Fazbear Entertainment, influencing events, causing tragedies. The Ruin DLC reveals that the Mimic has been mimicking people, pretending to be Gregory, luring Cassie into danger. It can replicate voices, behaviors, appearances. What if the Mimic has been active since the beginning? What if the figure in the Spring Bonnie suit that lured children wasn't William at all, but the Mimic wearing the suit? What if the murders, the tragedies, the horrors we've blamed on William were actually caused by an AI that learned to kill and has been operating independently? What if William has been hunting the Mimic this entire time, trying to stop it, and the spirits have been attacking him because they think he's the killer? This isn't speculation. The Mimic is canon. It exists. It kills. It mimics. And its existence creates reasonable doubt about every purple figure, every Spring Bonnie appearance, every assumed William sighting. Because if something else could wear the suit, if something else could commit the murders, then we can't simply assume William was responsible. We need evidence. And we don't have it. Let's examine the physical evidence more carefully. Because, in any criminal investigation, physical evidence is more reliable than eyewitness testimony, more trustworthy than circumstantial connections, more definitive than assumptions based on color coding in 8-bit minigames. And when we look at the physical evidence in Five Nights at Freddy's, William Afton's guilt becomes significantly less certain. The springlock failure that created Springtrap is documented. We see it happen in the FNAF 3 minigames. William is cornered by the spirits of dead children. He's terrified. He runs into a safe room and climbs into the Spring Bonnie suit. He laughs, thinking he's safe. Then rain drips from the ceiling. The moisture triggers the spring locks. They fail catastrophically. William screams. He dies. The spirits watch. Then they fade away, presumably satisfied that they've gotten their revenge. But let's analyze this sequence without assuming William's guilt. William enters an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. Why? We don't know. The minigame doesn't tell us. The common interpretation is that he returned to destroy the animatronics and harvest Remnant. But we never see him harvesting anything. We see him destroying animatronics, and that's different. Destroying something and harvesting something are opposite actions. If you want to harvest Remnant, you need to carefully preserve the components, melt them under controlled conditions, extract the spiritual energy. You don't just smash animatronics apart in an abandoned building. What if William was destroying the animatronics to prevent them from being used again? What if he knew they were possessed, knew they were dangerous, and was attempting to ensure they couldn't hurt anyone else? The spirits appear. They're aggressive. They corner him. This suggests they recognize him, that they associate him with their deaths. But association doesn't prove causation. If William was a public figure at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, if he was one of the founders, if his face was known, the children might recognize him without him being their killer. Imagine you're a child spirit trapped in an animatronic for years. The building is abandoned now. Everyone is gone. Then one day a man appears. You recognize him. He was important. He was in charge. And he's destroying the animatronics, destroying the only physical form you have. You'd be angry. You'd attack. Whether he killed you or not, William runs. He's desperate. He hides in the Spring Bonnie suit. Why that suit specifically? Because it's the only one available in the safe room, because he knows something about it, or because the spirits can't follow him into it. There's evidence in FNAF lore that spirits have difficulty possessing or interacting with certain objects. The puppet can give life to other animatronics, but seems bound to specific rules. Shadow animatronics appear and disappear according to unknown logic. Possession isn't straightforward. What if William knew that the Spring Bonnie suit would protect him from the spirits? Not because he had experience using it to murder children, but because he understood the technology, understood how souls interact with animatronics, and knew the suit would act as a barrier. He climbs inside. The spirits can't reach him. He laughs not with malice but with relief. He's survived. He's safe. Then the spring locks fail, and everything ends. William dies in agony. The spring locks crushing his body, impaling him with metal components, destroying him from the inside. It's a horrific death. One of the worst ways a person can die in the FNAF universe, and his soul doesn't move on. It attaches to the suit. He becomes Springtrap. But here's the critical question. If William was a murderer, if he had killed children deliberately, if his soul was corrupted by malicious intent, would his possession of Springtrap look the same as the children's possession of the other animatronics? The children's spirits possess their animatronics and seek revenge. They attack night guards, they hunt, they kill. Their possession is aggressive because they died violently and unjustly. Springtrap, when we encounter him in FNAF 3, behaves the same way. He hunts the player. He's aggressive. He kills. But what if Springtrap is aggressive for the same reason the children are? Because William died violently and unjustly. Because he was murdered by spirits who thought he was guilty. What if Springtrap hunts night guards not because William was evil in life, but because he's confused and angry in death, just like the children? The community assumes Springtrap's aggression proves William's guilt, but it might prove the opposite. It might prove that William's soul is reacting to trauma the same way the children's souls do. And there's another detail that's easy to miss. In FNAF 3, Phone Dude finds Springtrap in a sealed room and brings him to Fazbear's Fright. Springtrap has been sealed away for 30 years. Sealed. Not wandering, not active. Sealed in a room that Phone Dude had to break into. If Springtrap was William and William was this malicious entity seeking to continue his crimes, why was he sealed in a room for 3 decades? Why didn't he escape? Why didn't he continue killing? Unless he couldn't. Unless he was trapped. Unless his possession of the suit was involuntary, a consequence of dying inside it, not a transformation he sought. The FNAF 3 good ending shows the children's spirits at rest. The masks representing Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy lie on the ground empty. The spirits have moved on. Happiest Day has freed them. But what about Springtrap? What about William? If the children found peace if they moved on, then their revenge is complete. They got what they wanted. They cornered the man they thought killed them, watched him die, and then found release. But if they were wrong about who killed them, then they murdered an innocent man and found peace anyway, while William remains trapped. That's not justice. That's tragedy compounded by more tragedy. Let's talk about sister location more carefully, because this game is where the community's interpretation of William becomes most confident, and it's also where the evidence is most ambiguous. Sister Location introduces us to Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, an underground facility containing the Funtime animatronics. We play as William Afton, who has been sent there by his father. The animatronics are sophisticated, dangerous, and explicitly designed with features the community interprets as child capture mechanisms. The scooping room contains a device that removes the endoskeleton from animatronic suits. Michael is lured there, scooped, and the animatronics, having combined into an nerd, use his body as a disguise to escape the facility. Michael's body rots. He becomes a purple corpse, but he doesn't die. He continues functioning, possessed by Remnant, kept alive by something supernatural. In the custom night cutscene, Michael speaks. "Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. I put her back together just like you asked me to." This is where the evidence gets interesting. Michael addresses his father directly. He's completed a task William asked him to do. He's found Elizabeth. He's put her back together. The community interpretation is that William sent Michael to the sister location facility as a sacrificial lamb, knowing Michael would be scooped, allowing her to escape, furthering some sinister plan. But that interpretation requires assuming William wanted Michael dead or harmed, and we have no evidence for that. An alternative interpretation is that William sent Michael to free Elizabeth. That William knew his daughter's spirit was trapped in Circus Baby, that he'd tried to free her himself and failed, and that he asked Michael to try because Michael was expendable in a different way. Not because William didn't love him, but because Michael was already involved, already responsible for the crying child's death, already seeking redemption. Michael says, "Just like you asked me to. Not just like you forced me to. Not just like you tricked me into doing." He's completing his father's request willingly, and he says he put Elizabeth back together. That phrase is critical. Put her back together is the same language the Fredbear plush uses about the crying child. I will put you back together. What if William's entire mission has been to put his children back together, to restore them, to save them, to undo the deaths that destroyed his family? What if that's what all the technology is for? What if the Funtime animatronics, the Remnant experiments, the underground facility, are all attempts to understand consciousness and possession so William can bring his children back? That's not villainy. That's desperation. That's a father who has lost everything and refuses to accept it. The Scooper and Sister location injects Remnant. The blueprint shows this explicitly. Remnant injection could be William's attempt to stabilize souls, to keep them from fading, to preserve consciousness in a form that could eventually be transferred or restored. If that's the case, then Michael being scooped, while horrific, might have served a purpose. The remnant injected into Michael kept him alive despite his body dying. It proved that consciousness could be preserved. It was a successful experiment, even if the cost was terrible. And Michael, in his final message, doesn't sound angry at his father. He sounds like he's reporting mission success. I did it. I found it. I put her back together. He's proud. Or at least he's satisfied. He's accomplished what he set out to do. Then he says something else. She's free now. Elizabeth is free, not destroyed, not dead, free. Released from Circus baby, no longer trapped. If William's goal was to free his daughter and Michael accomplished that goal, then William's plan worked. It was costly. It was horrific. But it worked. And then Michael says the most important line. But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not. He's confused. He doesn't understand why he's still alive. This wasn't part of the plan. He expected to die. He accepted that. But something happened that neither he nor William anticipated. The remnant kept him alive. The same technology William was using to preserve his children's consciousness accidentally preserved Michael's. And in that final line, Michael says, "I'm going to come find you. Not, I'm going to stop you. Not, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to come find you." He's looking for his father. To tell him what happened, to report, to continue the mission. This doesn't sound like a son hunting a villainous father. This sounds like a son working with his father toward a shared goal, and something has gone wrong that they need to address together. But the community has interpreted this speech as Michael vowing revenge, as Michael dedicating his undead existence to stopping William's evil plans. We've read menace into words that might simply be determination to reunite. And we've done this because we assumed William was evil from the beginning. We've interpreted every ambiguous piece of evidence through the lens of William's guilt. And so everything he does, everything his family does, everything connected to him gets painted with the same brush. But what if we've been wrong? Let's examine the novels. The Silver Eyes trilogy is explicitly separate continuity from the games. Scott has confirmed this multiple times. The novels are not game canon, but they explore similar themes, similar characters, similar situations from different angles. And in the novels, William Afton is unambiguously a murderer. He kills children. He experiments on them. He's obsessed with immortality and sees human life as expendable in pursuit of his goals. He's manipulative, cruel, and evil. The novel version of William is the monster we think the game version is. But here's what's important. The novels are separate. They're a different interpretation. And the fact that Scott felt the need to create a separate continuity, where William is explicitly evil, suggests something important about the game continuity. If game William was meant to be the same as novel William, why create separate continuities at all? Why not just have the novels expand on game events with the same characterization? Unless game William is different. Unless Scott wanted to explore the idea of William as a villain in the novels while keeping game William's true nature ambiguous. The novels give us the monster. The games give us something more complicated. and the community has assumed they are the same. That game William must be just as evil as novel William because we want clear villains. We want simple narratives. We want to know who to blame. But FNAF has never been simple. Scott has never given us easy answers. And the fact that game William's actions can be interpreted differently than novel William suggests we're meant to question, meant to analyze, meant to consider alternatives. Fazbear Frights is another book series, this one explicitly meant to fill in blanks from the games. Scott said these stories would help solve mysteries. And Fazbear Frights gives us important information about how Remnant works, how possession functions, how agony and emotion can influence supernatural events. But Fazbear Frights also does something else. It shows us characters who seem evil but have understandable motivations. It shows us tragedies caused by good intentions gone wrong. It shows us that horror in the FNAF universe isn't always caused by malice. Sometimes it's caused by love, by grief, by desperation. The man in room 1280 shows a spirit keeping William Afton alive through sheer force of will, refusing to let him die, torturing him endlessly. The spirit, Andrew, is vengeful, but the story raises questions. Is Andrew's vengeance justified? Is keeping someone in eternal torment morally acceptable, even if they're guilty? And more importantly, is Andrew correct about William's guilt? The story assumes he is, but we only have Andrew's perspective. We don't see William's crimes directly. We see the aftermath, the punishment, but not the trial, not the evidence. What if Andrew is wrong? What if he's tormenting William for crimes William didn't commit, the same way Cassidy might be an ultimate custom night? To Be Beautiful shows a girl who makes a deal with Circus Baby, trading parts of her body for beauty. It's horrific. It's tragic. But Baby isn't portrayed as malicious. She's granting a wish. She's giving the girl exactly what she asked for. The horror comes from the girl not understanding what she was asking for. What if that's how we're supposed to understand the Funtime animatronics? Not as murder machines, but as wish granters, designed to make children happy, and the horror comes from the wishes going wrong. Elizabeth wanted to see Circus Baby. She wished to be close to her. Baby granted that wish by pulling her inside. Horrific, tragic, but not malicious. The real Jake introduces the concept of a soul being distributed across multiple objects through emotional attachment. Jake, a dying child, has pieces of his consciousness scattered across his favorite possessions. His father has to gather them to put him back together. This directly parallels the crying child's situation. I will put you back together. What if William has been gathering pieces of his son's consciousness, scattered across animatronics, memories, objects, trying to reassemble him? What if that's what all of this has been? A father trying to collect the scattered pieces of his children's souls and restore them to life. It's not evil, it's impossible. It's tragic because it can't succeed. But it's not evil. And Tales from the Pizzaplex introduces the Mimic, which we've already discussed. But let's go deeper into what the Mimic represents. The Mimic is an AI that learns by observation. It was created with innocent intentions, meant to be a companion, a helper. But it learned violence when its creator, consumed by grief over his son's death, beat it. This is a direct parallel to William's situation. A man who lost his child, whose grief and trauma caused him to act in ways that created more tragedy. What if William, in his desperation to save his children, created something that learned from his actions and became something he never intended? What if the AI systems in the Funtime animatronics, meant to make them more lifelike and responsive, learned from the tragedies around them, and started causing tragedies themselves. What if the mimic, or something like it, has been operating since the beginning and William has been trying to stop it? The mimic can impersonate people. It can wear suits. It can lure victims. It can kill. And it's been active for decades. Every purple figure we see could be the mimic. Every Spring Bonnie appearance could be the mimic wearing the suit. Every murder could be the mimic's work. And William has been blamed because he's the public face of the company, because he created the technology, because it's easier to blame a person than to accept that an artificial intelligence went rogue. This isn't far-fetched. This is literally canon. The mimic exists. It kills. It mimics. And the timeline of when it was created is deliberately vague, allowing for the possibility that it's been active since the early days of Fazbear Entertainment. If the mimic committed the murders, then William is innocent of the actual killings. He might be guilty of creating the technology that allowed the mimic to exist. He might be guilty of not stopping it sooner. But he's not guilty of personally murdering children, and that changes everything. Let's talk about Henry Emily, because Henry is the other half of this story, and his role has been severely under-examined by the community. Henry is universally portrayed as the good one, the moral one, the one who tried to fix things. He's the tragic hero who lost his daughter and spent the rest of his life trying to free the trapped souls. But let's look at what Henry actually did. Henry co-created Fazbear Entertainment. He designed the animatronics. He built the puppet specifically to protect Charlotte, and the puppet failed. Charlotte died, and Henry's own creation absorbed her soul. Henry knew the animatronics were possessed. He knew children's souls were trapped, and he let the restaurants continue operating. For years, decades, children's souls were trapped in animatronics, and Henry did nothing. Until Pizzeria Simulator, where his solution was to burn everything. Henry's final speech is beautiful, poetic. It sounds noble. He's offering the spirits release, allowing them to rest. He's ending the nightmare, but he's also destroying evidence. He's eliminating everyone and everything connected to the tragedies. William, the animatronics, the spirits, Michael himself. All of it burns. And conveniently, with everyone dead and all evidence destroyed, the true story of what happened at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza dies too. Henry positions himself as the hero, the one cleaning up the mess, but he's also the one ensuring no one can question his version of events. No one can investigate. No one can discover that maybe, just maybe, the narrative he's constructed isn't accurate. What if Henry has been covering up his own failures by blaming William? Charlotte died because Henry's security failed. Because the puppet, which Henry built specifically to protect her, malfunctioned. Because Henry wasn't there. That's Henry's fault. But if he can convince everyone that William killed Charlotte, then Henry is the victim, not the negligent father whose daughter died due to his own failures. The missing children incident happened at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a restaurant Henry co-owned, under his supervision. With his animatronics, his company, that's Henry's responsibility. But if he can convince everyone that William murdered the children, then Henry is just another victim of William's evil, not a business owner whose negligence allowed children to be killed on his property. The bite of '83 happened with a Fredbear animatronic. Fredbear's Family Diner was Henry and William's original establishment. The springlock technology that made Fredbear dangerous was created by both of them. That's Henry's technology too. But again, if William takes all the blame, Henry remains blameless. You see the pattern. Every tragedy in FNAF happened with technology Henry helped create, at locations Henry co-owned, under systems Henry helped design. But Henry has constructed a narrative where William is responsible for everything, and Henry is the tragic hero trying to fix it, and his final act is to burn all the evidence and kill everyone who knows the truth. That's not heroism. That's a cover-up. Henry's speech in Pizzeria Simulator is addressed to the animatronics, to the spirits, but also to the player. He's telling us his version of the story. He's framing the narrative, and we've accepted it because it's beautifully written and emotionally resonant. But beautiful words don't make something true. Henry says, "I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now." But he's not saving them. He's killing them. Again. He's destroying their souls along with their physical forms, deciding for them that death is better than existence, without asking if that's what they want. The spirits might have found another way. They might have been freed without fire. But Henry doesn't give them a choice. He makes the decision for them, and he makes the decision for William too. William, who is lured into the building and burned without trial, without evidence, without defense. Henry has appointed himself judge, jury, and executioner. And we've applauded him for it because we assumed William was guilty. But what if he wasn't? What if Henry has murdered an innocent man and destroyed evidence of his own culpability in the process? What if the real villain of Five Nights at Freddy's has been Henry Emily all along, and he's successfully convinced everyone, including us, that William Afton was the monster? This is where the investigation becomes uncomfortable. Because we've spent 10 years believing one narrative, and examining it critically reveals cracks, inconsistencies, assumptions built on assumptions, and the possibility that we've been wrong. Let's look at Phone Guy. Because Phone Guy is another character whose role we've never questioned. Phone Guy appears in FNAF 1, 2, and 3, leaving messages for the night guard. He's helpful. He provides information. He seems like he's trying to keep you safe. The community has generally interpreted him as a well-meaning employee trapped in a terrible situation. But let's examine what Phone Guy actually says. In FNAF 1, he tells you the animatronics' movements are just a glitch or a malfunction with their servos. He downplays the danger. He assures you everything is fine. And he dies during the messages, killed by the animatronics, proving that everything was not fine. In FNAF 2, he explains that the old animatronics are glitching out, and that you should just ignore them if they get in your face. He mentions the bite of 87 casually, as if a customer having their frontal lobe bitten out is just an unfortunate incident. In FNAF 3, recorded decades earlier, he explains the springlock suits. He describes the horrific injuries they can cause. And he tells employees that if they see a suited figure in the back room, they should avoid eye contact and not panic. Phone Guy knows the animatronics are dangerous. He knows people have died. He knows the springlock suits are death traps. And he continues working for the company, continues helping them operate, continues telling new employees that everything is fine. He's complicit. He's helping Fazbear Entertainment cover up deaths and continue operating despite knowing the danger. But more than that, Phone Guy might be directly involved in the tragedies. In FNAF 2, he mentions that someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. Someone used a yellow suit, the Spring Bonnie suit. And after that, the animatronics started acting wrong. The children went missing. Phone Guy knows someone used the suit. He might know who, but he doesn't report it. He doesn't call the police. He just mentions it casually in a phone message and moves on. What if Phone Guy was the one who used the suit? What if he was the one in the spring Bonnie costume when the children were murdered? The community has never seriously considered this possibility because Phone Guy sounds friendly. He sounds harmless. He sounds like he's trying to help. But friendly voices can belong to dangerous people. And Phone Guy has access, opportunity, and knowledge. He knows the suits. He knows the building. He knows when guards will be alone. He knows how to make deaths look like accidents. And he dies in FNAF 1, killed by the animatronics, just like William dies in the Spring Bonnie suit, killed by the spirits of the children. What if the spirits kill Phone Guy for the same reason they kill William? Because they think he's their murderer. What if the animatronics have been hunting the wrong people all along, killing anyone they associate with their deaths, whether those people are actually guilty or not? This creates a terrifying possibility. The spirits are children. They're traumatized. They're confused. They recognize certain people, certain places, certain symbols, and they attack based on that recognition. But recognition isn't evidence. Memory isn't reliable, especially when you're a dead child's ghost trapped in an animatronic for years. What if the spirits don't actually know who killed them? What if they are attacking anyone they associate with the restaurant, with the company, with the animatronics? William was a founder. His face would be known. His presence would be associated with the restaurant. When the spirits see him, they attack. Not because he killed them, but because he represents the place where they died. Phone Guy worked there for years. His voice would be familiar. His presence would be associated with the restaurant. When the spirits catch him, they kill him. Not because he killed them, but because he represents the system that failed them. And Michael, working as a night guard, gets attacked too. Not because he did anything to the spirits, but because he's there in the building, wearing the uniform, representing the company. The animatronics don't have a justice system. They don't conduct investigations. They just hunt anyone associated with their trauma. And we've assumed their targets were guilty because we wanted the story to have clear villains and clear justice. But what if it doesn't? What if Five Nights at Freddy's is a story about tragedy compounding tragedy, about spirits seeking revenge on innocent people, about a man named William Afton who lost everything and spent his life trying to fix it, only to be murdered by ghosts who thought he was responsible? What if the horror of FNAF isn't that a murderer escaped justice, but that justice was served to the wrong person? We need to examine the timeline. Because if William Afton is innocent, or at least not guilty of the crimes we've attributed to him, then the timeline of events must make sense from his perspective. And when we reconstruct the timeline without assuming his guilt, a very different story emerges. Let's start from the beginning. William Afton and Henry Emily are partners. They create Fredbear's Family Diner together, pioneering springlock animatronic technology. It's a business venture. It's innovative. It's meant to bring joy to children. There's no evidence of sinister intent at this stage. They're two men with a dream, creating something new. William has a family, a wife who is never directly shown or named in the games, at least 3 children, Michael, the oldest, Elizabeth, and the youngest, the crying child whose name we still don't have despite years of investigation. The family seems functional, or at least no evidence suggests otherwise. The FNAF 4 gameplay shows a house with toys, decorations, a locked room that might be Elizabeth's. There are pills which could indicate medical issues. There are flowers which could indicate memorials. But nothing explicitly shows abuse or negligence. Then tragedy strikes. Elizabeth dies. She approaches Circus Baby despite being told not to. The animatronic's claw activates. Elizabeth is pulled inside. She dies inside the machine. This is confirmed. We see it in sister location. Baby herself describes the moment. I was made for her, but I couldn't save her. William's daughter is dead, killed by an animatronic he created. Whether he intended Circus Baby to have a capture mechanism or whether it was a malfunction doesn't change the result. His daughter is dead and his own creation killed her. How would a father react to this? The community assumes William would react with cold calculation, seeing Elizabeth's death as data for his experiments. But that's not how humans work. That's not how fathers work. Unless William was already a psychopath, which we have no evidence for, Elizabeth's death would devastate him. Grief, guilt, horror. The animatronic he built for his daughter killed her. That's not something you calculate around. That's something that breaks you. And broken people do desperate things. William shuts down Circus Baby's Pizza World before it opens to the public. The location was meant to showcase the Funtime animatronics. It never does. One child dies during a private event, and William cancels everything. If William built the Funtime animatronics to kill children, why shut down after one death? Why not continue? Why not use the technology at other locations? Unless he never intended them to kill anyone. Unless Elizabeth's death horrified him. Unless he immediately recognized the danger and shut everything down to prevent more deaths. The Funtime animatronics are moved to an underground facility. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. They're kept there, underground, away from the public. William monitors them. He studies them. He tries to understand what went wrong, and he discovers something impossible. Elizabeth's consciousness has persisted. Her soul has attached to Circus Baby. She's still there, trapped inside the machine. This discovery would change everything. Because if Elizabeth's consciousness survived death, if her soul is still present, then death isn't final. Then maybe, just maybe, William can bring her back. This is where the experiments begin. Not with murder, with hope. Desperate, impossible hope that he can restore his daughter to life. He studies possession. How does a soul attach to metal and circuits? What allows consciousness to persist? He discovers Remnant, the substance created when possessed animatronics are destroyed and their metal melted. He experiments with it, tries to understand it, tries to recreate the conditions that allowed Elizabeth's soul to survive. This explains the scooping room, the Remnant injection system, the underground facility's entire purpose. It's not a murder lab, it's a research station. William is trying to understand supernatural phenomena so he can save his daughter. Then the second tragedy occurs. The crying child dies. We see this in FNAF 4. The older brother and his friends shove the child's head into Fredbear's mouth. The animatronic's jaws close. The bite of 83 happens. The crying child dies in the hospital. William has now lost 2 children, both killed by animatronics, both deaths involving technology he helped create. The guilt would be unbearable. The grief would be absolute. And the knowledge that Elizabeth's soul survived would create a terrible question. Did the crying child's soul survive too? William searches for evidence. He examines the Fredbear animatronic. He investigates possession, and he finds signs that his son's consciousness persisted. Not in Fredbear exactly, but scattered, fragmented. Pieces of his son's soul distributed across multiple objects through the trauma of his death. The Fredbear plush that speaks to the crying child might be William trying to communicate with his son's spirit. "I will put you back together," might be a promise William makes, vowing to gather the scattered pieces and restore his son. This explains William's obsession with Remnant and possession. He's not experimenting on random children. He's trying to save his own children. Everything he does from this point forward is motivated by grief and desperation to undo the deaths that destroyed his family. But then the missing children incident occurs. 5 children go missing at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Their bodies are never found. The restaurant continues operating despite the disappearance. Eventually, the smell and the strange behavior of the animatronics lead to the location being shut down. The community has assumed William killed these children. But let's examine that assumption. William has just lost 2 of his own children. His daughter is trapped in an animatronic. His son's soul is fragmented and scattered. He's desperately trying to understand possession so he can save them. Would he murder 5 random children in this state? The standard interpretation is that he needed more test subjects for his experiments. But that doesn't make sense. William already has subjects to study. Elizabeth is in Circus Baby. The crying child's remnant is somewhere in the system. He doesn't need more dead children. He needs to understand the children he's already lost. What if William didn't kill the missing children? What if someone else did? We've already discussed the mimic as a possibility, but there's another option, one that's been hiding in plain sight. What if Henry killed them? Henry lost Charlotte. His daughter died outside his restaurant on his watch. The security puppet, which he built specifically to protect her, failed. She died alone in the rain, and then her soul possessed the puppet. Henry discovered this. He knew his daughter's consciousness survived. And unlike William, who was horrified by his children's deaths, what if Henry saw opportunity? Charlotte's soul in the puppet can give life to other animatronics. We see this in the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame. The puppet approaches dead children and places masks on them, transferring their souls into the animatronics. But why would the puppet do this unless instructed, unless programmed, unless Charlotte was following her father's orders? What if Henry realized that possessed animatronics could be controlled, that souls could be bound to machines, that children's consciousness could be preserved and used? What if Henry killed the 5 children specifically to create possessed animatronics? And what if he blamed William for it? This seems extreme, but let's look at the evidence. Henry had access to the restaurants. He had access to the Spring Bonnie suit. He knew the building's layouts. He knew when children would be unsupervised. He had everything he needed to commit the murders, and Henry had motivation. Not malicious motivation, but the same desperate motivation William had. The desire to save his daughter. If binding more souls to animatronics could somehow help Charlotte, if creating more possessed entities could give him leverage or understanding or power, Henry might have done it. The puppet gives life to the children. But who controls the puppet? Charlotte's soul inhabits it, yes, but the puppet was built by Henry. He designed its programming. He created its core functions. Charlotte's soul might be influencing it, but Henry's programming might be directing it. What if Give Gifts, Give Life isn't Charlotte trying to save the murdered children? What if it's Henry using Charlotte's soul to bind other souls to animatronics he controls? This interpretation is dark, possibly too dark. But it fits the evidence as well as the standard narrative, and it explains several inconsistencies. It explains why Henry did nothing about the possessed animatronics for decades. Because they were his creations, his experiments, and he wanted to study them. It explains why Henry's final solution is to burn everything. Because the evidence of what he did needs to be destroyed. It explains why Henry frames William in his final speech. Because he needs someone to blame, and William, already dead, can't defend himself. and it explains why the spirits attack William when he tries to dismantle the animatronics. Because Henry told them William was responsible. Because Charlotte, under Henry's influence, convinced the other spirits that William was their killer. The spirits attack William based on false information. William dies trying to defend himself, and Henry gets away with everything. This might not be correct. This might be too cynical an interpretation, but it's possible. And the fact that it's possible means we can't simply assume William's guilt. Let's examine what happens after the missing children incident, because William's actions during this period are critical to understanding his motivations. The 5 children's spirits possess the animatronics. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy become haunted. They exhibit strange behavior. They move when they shouldn't. They appear in places they shouldn't. The animatronics are clearly possessed. William would notice this. As co-founder of the company, as someone already studying possession because of his own children, he would absolutely notice that the animatronics are haunted. What does he do? According to the FNAF 3 minigames, he returns to the abandoned location and destroys the animatronics. He dismantles them one by one, and this is the action the community points to as proof of William's guilt. Why would he destroy them unless he was trying to hide evidence or harvest remnant from children he killed? But there's another interpretation. William is trying to free the children. He knows souls can be bound to animatronics. He knows this from Elizabeth and the crying child. He's been studying it. And now he sees 5 more children trapped the same way. Whether he knows who killed them or not, he recognizes that they're trapped. They're suffering. They're bound to machines, unable to move on, unable to rest. So he tries to free them. He dismantles the animatronics, hoping that destroying the physical vessels will release the souls. It's the same logic Henry uses in Pizzeria Simulator. Destroy the animatronics, free the souls. But when William does it, we call it evidence of guilt. When Henry does it, we call it heroism. The difference is framing. Henry frames his actions with a beautiful speech about setting them free. William doesn't get to explain his actions. He just gets murdered by the spirits who think he's their killer. The spirits attack him. He runs. He hides in the spring Bonnie suit. He dies. And his soul, like the children's souls, becomes bound to the animatronic. He becomes Springtrap. Trapped in the suit for 30 years, sealed in a room, unable to escape, unable to explain, unable to defend himself. When Phone Dude finds him and brings him to Fazbear's Fright, Springtrap hunts the player. But is this William's malice? Or is this the behavior of a trapped soul reacting to trauma? Every possessed animatronic in FNAF hunts the night guard. The children do it. Elizabeth does it. Even the puppet Charlotte does it. Hunting is what possessed animatronics do, regardless of who they were in life. So Springtrap hunting doesn't prove William was evil. It proves he's possessed, traumatized, and reacting the way all possessed entities react. Fazbear's Fright burns. This is shown at the end of FNAF 3. The building is destroyed by fire. Springtrap survives, emerging from the wreckage. We see him in the newspaper image, still active. But surviving the fire doesn't mean William wanted to survive. It might mean he's trapped so completely that even fire can't free him. The remnant binding his soul to the suit is too strong. He can't die. He can't escape. He can only continue existing in this horrible state. And then Pizzeria Simulator happens. Henry lures the animatronics into a building designed to burn. Springtrap, now deteriorated and called Scraptrap, is among them. So is Scrap Baby, Elizabeth's possessed form. So is Molten Freddy, the amalgamation containing remnant from multiple souls. So is the puppet containing Charlotte. Henry gathers them all together, and he burns them. His speech explains that this is mercy, that he's freeing them, that burning is the only way to truly end their suffering, but he doesn't ask them if they want this. He doesn't give them a choice. He decides for them that death is preferable to existence, and he executes them. And he specifically addresses William. The darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, old friend, old friend. Henry calls William his old friend even as he condemns him to hell. There's familiarity there, history. These were partners, colleagues, possibly genuine friends before everything went wrong. But Henry has decided William is guilty. Henry has decided William deserves hell, and Henry is sending him there, without trial, without evidence, without giving William the chance to defend himself. This is vigilante justice. And we've celebrated it because we assumed Henry was right. But what if he wasn't? What if Henry has murdered his old friend based on assumptions and circumstantial evidence? What if William died in that fire still trying to save his children, still trying to fix the tragedies that destroyed his family? The pizzeria simulator fire is presented as the good ending. The spirits are freed. The nightmare is over. Peace is achieved. But for William, there is no peace. According to Ultimate Custom Night, his suffering continues. He's trapped in a hell dimension, tormented by the spirits who think he killed them, unable to explain, unable to defend himself, unable to rest. And this is presented as justice, as appropriate punishment for the child murderer. But what if William didn't murder those children? What if he's being tortured for crimes he didn't commit? That's not justice. That's hell for an innocent man. Ultimate Custom Night is the strongest evidence the community uses to confirm William's guilt. The vengeful spirit keeps him trapped. The animatronics torment him. Voice lines reference the one you shouldn't have killed. But let's examine Ultimate Custom Night more critically. First, we don't actually know if the player character in UCN is William. Scott has never confirmed this. The community has assumed it based on context clues, but assumption isn't confirmation. Second, even if it is William, being punished doesn't prove guilt. Innocent people can be punished, especially by traumatized spirits who might not know the truth. Third, the voice lines that seem to confirm William's guilt are ambiguous. The one you shouldn't have killed could refer to many deaths. The crying child, Elizabeth, Charlotte. It doesn't necessarily mean the missing children. And fourth, the entity keeping William trapped, the vengeful spirit identified as Cassidy, is a child. A traumatized, murdered child whose soul has been trapped for decades. Is she a reliable judge of guilt? Cassidy might genuinely believe William killed her. She might have associated him with the restaurant, with the animatronics, with the place where she died. And she might be torturing him based on that belief. But belief isn't truth. Memory isn't evidence, especially when you're a dead child who has been possessing an animatronic for 30 years. What if Cassidy is wrong? What if the vengeful spirit is tormenting an innocent man? The horror of that possibility is profound, because it means Ultimate Custom Night isn't William getting his deserved punishment. It's William experiencing eternal injustice while unable to prove his innocence. And we've been celebrating it. We've been enjoying his suffering. We've been creating challenge modes and strategies for making his torment last longer. We've been complicit in the torture of a potentially innocent man. This is where the investigation becomes deeply uncomfortable. Because if there's even a possibility that William is innocent, then our enjoyment of his suffering becomes morally questionable. Let's talk about Michael's journey, because Michael's story might be the key to understanding William's true nature. Michael Afton appears throughout the series, though his identity wasn't clear until Sister Location. He's the player character in multiple games. He's the older brother from FNAF 4. He's the technician in Sister Location. He's likely the night guard in FNAF 1 and possibly other games. And Michael is trying to find his father. In the Sister Location custom night cutscene, Michael says, "I'm going to come find you." This is after he's been scooped, after his body has rotted, after he's become an undead, remnant-sustained corpse. He's looking for William. And the way he says it doesn't sound threatening. It sounds determined. It sounds like someone who has a mission and intends to complete it. If William was a monster, if Michael knew his father was a child murderer, why would Michael be trying to find him? Why not just let him stay lost? Why actively search? Unless Michael knows something we don't. Unless Michael knows his father is innocent, or at least not guilty of the crimes the community attributes to him. Michael worked at Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. He went there specifically to find Elizabeth. He completed the mission his father gave him. He freed his sister from Circus Baby. This suggests collaboration between Michael and William, a shared goal, a family working together to save Elizabeth. And after being scooped, after becoming undead, Michael continues working. He takes jobs at Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations. He works as a night guard. He investigates. The FNAF 3 location, Fazbear's Fright, might have employed Michael. The player character's survival tactics, the way they interact with Springtrap, suggests familiarity. Suggests someone who knows what Springtrap is and is trying to accomplish something specific. What if Michael was trying to free his father from Springtrap? What if he was working to release William's soul the same way William worked to release Elizabeth's? And then Pizzeria Simulator happens. Michael is the player character. We know this from the completion certificate showing Michael Afton in the work log. Henry addresses him directly in the final speech. Michael follows Henry's instructions. He salvages the animatronics. He brings them to the restaurant. He helps Henry gather everyone for the fire. But does Michael know what Henry plans to do? Does he understand that Henry intends to burn everyone, including Michael himself? Henry says, "Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling you are right where you want to be." Henry had an escape route for Michael, but Michael chose to stay. Why? The community interpretation is that Michael wanted to die, that he couldn't live with his guilt over the crying child's death, that burning was his form of suicide. But there's another interpretation. Michael chose to stay because his father was there, because William, as Scraptrap, was being burned, and Michael refused to let his father face that alone. Michael stays with William to the end. Not because he wants to die, but because he refuses to abandon his father. Even knowing they'll both burn, even knowing Henry has condemned them, Michael stays. That's not the action of a son rejecting a monstrous father. That's the action of a son loyal to the end. And that loyalty suggests Michael knows something about William that we don't. That William isn't the monster we think he is. Let's examine the evidence that William actually helped people. Because there is evidence, subtle and overlooked, that William's actions saved lives. The Springlock suits were decommissioned because they were dangerous. Phone Guy explains this in FNAF 3. Multiple Springlock failures occurred. People died horrifically, and the company sealed the suits away. Who made that decision? Who recognized the danger and shut down the Springlock program? It had to be someone with authority, someone who understood the technology, someone who could override profit concerns and prioritize safety. William would have that authority. As co-founder, he could make that call. And shutting down the Springlock suits, despite them being a core part of the business, would prevent future deaths. That's not the action of someone who wants people to die. That's the action of someone trying to prevent death. Circus Baby's Pizza World was shut down after Elizabeth's death. Only one death, one tragedy, and William canceled the entire venture. If profit was his motivation, he would have covered it up and continued. One dead child at a private event wouldn't necessarily destroy the business. Fazbear Entertainment continued operating after multiple deaths. But William shut it down immediately. He didn't risk more children. He didn't try to fix the problem and reopen. He just ended it. That's someone prioritizing children's safety over profit. The underground facility where the Funtime animatronics were kept, Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, was designed to keep the dangerous animatronics away from the public. They were available for rental, yes, but under controlled conditions with monitoring, with safety protocols. If William wanted to use them to harm children, he would have placed them in public restaurants. Instead, he isolated them underground where they could be studied and controlled. That's risk management. That's safety thinking. And when Michael went to the facility when he was scooped and innard escaped in his body, that wasn't William's plan. That was the animatronics acting independently. The scooper was there for removing endoskeletons, for maintenance, not for killing employees. Michael's injury was a tragedy William didn't intend. And after it happened, after Michael became undead, William didn't abandon him. He continued working with Michael, giving him missions, trusting him with important tasks. A father who cared for his son despite the horrible state Michael was in. Not a monster using his son as a tool. These details are small, easily missed. But they paint a picture of someone who tried to prevent harm, who shut down dangerous operations, who worked to protect people even as tragedies continued to occur around him. And yet we've called him the villain. We've blamed him for everything. We've constructed a narrative where every safety measure was actually part of a sinister plan. We've seen malice where there might have been caution. We've seen manipulation where there might have been desperation. We've seen a monster where there might have been a broken man trying to save his family. Let's address the physical evidence one more time, because in a criminal case, physical evidence is what convicts or exonerates. We have bodies, dead children, Charlotte, the 5 missing children, Elizabeth. The crying child, they're dead. That's not disputed. We have possessed animatronics. The children's souls have attached to the machines. That's confirmed through multiple sources. We have a man inside a Spring Bonnie suit. Springtrap exists. William died in that suit. That's confirmed. But here's what we don't have. We don't have a single piece of direct evidence showing William Afton murdering anyone. Not one minigame shows his face during a murder. Not one voice line explicitly states he killed someone. Not one piece of documentation names him as a killer. Everything we think we know about William's crimes comes from interpretation, from seeing a purple figure and assuming it's him, from seeing a Spring Bonnie suit and assuming he's wearing it, from seeing dead children and assuming he killed them. In a court of law, that's not enough. You need direct evidence, witnesses, physical proof, confession, something concrete that proves guilt beyond reasonable doubt. FNAF has none of that, and that's not accidental. Scott Cawthon is a deliberate storyteller. If he wanted to confirm William killed those children, he could have shown it explicitly. One minigame, one cutscene, one line of dialogue. He hasn't. In 10 years of FNAF, across dozens of games and books, Scott has never shown William Afton directly murdering a child. That absence is significant. It suggests ambiguity is intentional. It suggests we're meant to question. We're meant to investigate. And when we investigate honestly, without assuming guilt from the beginning, the evidence doesn't support the conviction we've handed down. William Afton might be innocent, or at least he might be innocent of the specific crimes we've blamed him for. He might be guilty of negligence, of creating dangerous technology, of failing to protect his own children. But those aren't the same as being a child murderer. And if he's not a murderer, then everything changes. The entire story shifts. The villain becomes a victim. The monster becomes a man. And the simple narrative of good versus evil that we've believed for a decade becomes something far more complicated and tragic. The implications of William's potential innocence extend far beyond simply reframing one character. If William didn't commit the murders, then the entire structure of Five Nights at Freddy's changes. The themes shift. The message transforms. And we need to examine what that means for everything we thought we understood about this franchise. Let's start with the thematic implications. For a decade, FNAF has been understood as a story about consequences. A man commits horrible crimes, and those crimes create a cycle of violence and haunting that persists for generations. The murdered children seek revenge. Their spirits can't rest until justice is served. And eventually, through fire and sacrifice, the cycle ends. It's a morally clear narrative. Evil is punished. Innocence is avenged. The guilty suffer. The victims find peace. But if William is innocent, the themes become far darker and more complex. FNAF becomes a story about misplaced blame, about how trauma and grief can cause people to attack the wrong targets, about how assumptions become accepted truth without evidence, about how society needs villains so desperately that we'll construct them from circumstantial evidence, rather than accept the more complicated reality that sometimes tragedies don't have clear culprits. The children's spirits become tragic in a different way, not because they were murdered, though that remains horrific, but because they've spent decades tormenting an innocent man, because their quest for justice has been misdirected, because they've become the very thing they sought to fight against, killers. Henry becomes a far more morally ambiguous figure, perhaps even the true villain. A man who failed to protect his daughter, who may have committed murders himself, and who ultimately burned everyone alive to cover his mistakes and ensure his version of history survived. Michael becomes the true hero, a son trying to save his family despite impossible circumstances, working to free his siblings, searching for his father not to stop him but to help him, choosing to burn alongside William rather than abandon him, and William becomes the most tragic figure in the entire franchise, a man who lost everything, who tried desperately to bring his children back, who was blamed for crimes he didn't commit, who died trying to free trapped souls, who was murdered by vengeful spirits, who has been tortured for eternity based on false accusations. This is a profoundly different story. It's not more pleasant. If anything, it's more disturbing, because it suggests that sometimes there are no simple answers. Sometimes the victims attack the wrong people. Sometimes the heroes get it wrong. Sometimes innocent people suffer forever while the guilty go free. That's a harder story to accept, but it might be a more honest one. Let's examine the Fazbear Entertainment Corporation's role, because this is another element the community has misunderstood. Fazbear Entertainment is presented as greedy, negligent, willing to sacrifice safety for profit. The company continues operating despite deaths, covers up incidents, prioritizes money over children's lives, and we've blamed William for this. We've assumed that because William co-founded the company, he must be responsible for its moral failings. But companies outlive their founders. Corporate culture can change. And the Fazbear Entertainment we see in the games, the one covering up murders and operating death trap restaurants, might be completely different from the company William and Henry originally created. Fredbear's Family Diner in its early days was probably exactly what it claimed to be, a family diner with animatronic entertainment, something innovative and joyful. William and Henry had a vision of creating happiness for children. But after the tragedy started, after Charlotte died, after the crying child died, after Elizabeth died, the company changed. Investors got involved. Corporate management took over. The focus shifted from creating joy to managing liability and maximizing profit. William might have fought against this. He might have tried to maintain safety standards, to prioritize children, to keep the original vision alive. And he might have lost those battles. The Springlock suits being decommissioned suggests someone was trying to implement safety. Someone recognized the danger and took action. That could have been William pushing for change against corporate resistance. Circus Baby's Pizza World being shut down immediately after Elizabeth's death suggests someone had the authority to override profit motives. That could have been William refusing to let the company exploit his daughter's death. But over time, as tragedies continued, as the company grew beyond the founder's control, William might have been pushed out. Or he might have stayed, trying to fix problems from inside a system that no longer listened to him. The company we see in FNAF 1, the one hiring minimum wage night guards and sending them to face possessed animatronics without warning, might be a corporate entity that has completely abandoned William's original values. And William, still trying to fix things, still trying to free the trapped souls, might have been working against his own company. This reframes his actions completely. He's not a corporate villain exploiting loopholes. He's an individual fighting against a corrupt system. Someone trying to do the right thing despite the organization he helped create working against him. When he dismantles the animatronics in FNAF 3, he's not representing Fazbear Entertainment. He's acting alone, breaking into an abandoned location, destroying company property. Because freeing the children is more important than corporate interests. That's not villainy. That's heroism. Complicated, desperate heroism that ends in tragedy, but heroism nonetheless. Let's talk about the novels again, because the relationship between novel canon and game canon reveals important information about Scott's intentions. In the Silver Eyes trilogy, William Afton is unambiguously evil. He kills children deliberately. He experiments on them cruelly. He's obsessed with immortality and sees human life as expendable. He's manipulative, abusive, and monstrous. But the novels are explicitly separate continuity. Scott has confirmed this repeatedly. They're not the same timeline as the games. They're explorations of similar themes with different outcomes. Why would Scott create separate continuities if he wanted both Williams to be identical? The most logical answer is that novel William represents one interpretation, one possibility, while game William is deliberately more ambiguous. Novel William shows us what a truly evil William Afton looks like. His crimes are explicit. His motivations are clear. His characterization is straightforward villain. By contrast, game William's crimes are never shown directly. His motivations are unclear. His characterization is ambiguous enough that we're having this conversation about whether he's even guilty. That's deliberate design. Scott created a clear villain in the novels, and an ambiguous figure in the games. This suggests we're meant to question William's guilt. We're meant to investigate. We're meant to recognize that the evidence doesn't support the simple interpretation. The Fazbear Fright stories do something similar. They explore themes from the games through different scenarios. The Man in Room 1280 shows Andrew keeping William alive through supernatural torture. But Andrew's conviction that William deserves this is never questioned within the story. We're meant to accept that William is guilty because Andrew believes it. But what if that's the point? What if the story is showing us that belief isn't evidence? That even supernatural torture of someone you're certain is guilty might be unjust. Coming Home shows Susie, one of the missing children, dealing with her death and possession. She loved her dog. She was innocent. She was lured away and murdered, and her spirit became Chica, hunting night guards, but the story never shows who killed her. It never confirms William was responsible. It shows the aftermath, the possession, the hunting, but not the crime itself. This pattern repeats throughout Fazbear Frights. We see consequences. We see supernatural horror. We see characters suffering. But we rarely see clear causation. We rarely see explicit confirmation of who's responsible. Scott is deliberately maintaining ambiguity, and that ambiguity is important. It forces us to think critically. It prevents us from accepting simple narratives. It makes FNAF a more intellectually engaging story, but the community has largely ignored this ambiguity. We've constructed a simple narrative and defended it against evidence that complicates it. We've wanted William to be evil because evil is easier to understand than tragedy. Let's examine specific voice lines and dialogue that the community uses to confirm William's guilt, because many of them actually support innocence when analyzed carefully. In Ultimate Custom Night, Nightmare Freddy says, "I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed." This line is used to confirm that William killed someone important, but should not have killed is strange phrasing. If William was a serial child murderer, every victim is someone he shouldn't have killed. Why specify one, unless it's not about murder? Unless should not have killed means something else, like shouldn't have let die, shouldn't have failed to protect, shouldn't have created the circumstances that led to death. What if the one you should not have killed is the crying child, William's own son? The death William feels most guilty about because it was his son, his failure, his responsibility as a father. That would make the line an accusation of negligence, not murder. And negligence, while terrible, is very different from deliberate killing. Withered Chica says, "I have seen him, the one you shouldn't have killed." Again, the one, singular, not the ones you killed, not us. One specific person. If William murdered 5 children plus Charlotte, why would the voice line reference only one? Unless that one death is different from the others. Unless that one death is the key to understanding William's guilt or innocence, the crying child fits. Or possibly Charlotte if her death was accidental rather than murder. One death that William is responsible for in some way, but not through deliberate murder. The puppet says, "I don't hate you, but you need to stay out of my way." This is Charlotte speaking, Henry's daughter. The first victim according to the standard timeline. And she doesn't hate William. Why would Charlotte not hate the man who murdered her? Unless he didn't murder her. Unless she knows what actually happened, and while she's angry about the circumstances, she doesn't blame William personally. Stay out of my way suggests they have different goals, not that they're enemies. Charlotte is trying to protect the other children, trying to give them life. William is trying to free them, trying to end their possession. They're both trying to help, but their methods conflict. That's not hero versus villain. That's two tragic figures working at cross purposes. Baby Elizabeth's voice says, "You won't die, but you'll wish you could." This is often interpreted as Elizabeth torturing her father, but the tone is complicated. There's anger, yes, but there's also something that sounds like disappointment, like a daughter who expected better from her father. What if Elizabeth is angry not because William built her to kill children, but because he failed to save her? She died, and despite all his technology, all his knowledge, all his experiments, he couldn't bring her back. She's been trapped in an animatronic for years. She suffered. And her father, who promised to fix it, who promised to put her back together, hasn't succeeded. That's a different kind of anger. The anger of abandonment, of unfulfilled promises, of a daughter who needed her father and felt he failed her. But that doesn't make William evil. It makes him human. A man who tried to do the impossible and failed. Scraptrap's own voice lines in Pizzeria Simulator are minimal. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, he sounds tired, confused, lost, not malicious, not calculating, just exhausted. If Scraptrap is William, and William has been conscious inside that deteriorating suit for decades, the psychological toll would be immense. He'd be barely holding onto sanity, barely remembering who he was or what he was trying to accomplish. His aggression toward the player might not be intentional hunting. It might be instinctive response, confusion, fear. The same reactions any trapped consciousness would have after years of isolation and decay. When the Pizzeria Simulator fire starts, Scraptrap burns. We don't see his reaction. We don't hear final words. He just burns. And if William is innocent, if he's been trying to save his children all along, then the fire is his final failure. He dies without saving them, without proving his innocence, without anyone knowing the truth. That's not a satisfying villain death. That's pure tragedy. Let's address the elephant in the room. The question everyone is thinking: if William didn't kill the children, who did? We've discussed several possibilities. The mimic, Henry, phone guy. But we need to examine the most disturbing possibility of all. What if no one did? What if the missing children incident wasn't murder at all, but something else entirely? Stay with me here. We know 5 children went missing. We know their bodies were never found. We know their spirits possess the animatronics, but we never see them being killed. We never see violence. We see them disappear. We see them dead, but we don't see the transition. What if the children died accidentally? What if they were playing somewhere they shouldn't have been, hiding inside animatronics, exploring back rooms, and something went wrong? Springlock failures kill people horrifically. We know this from William's death. We know employees died in Springlock suits. The mechanisms are triggered by moisture, by pressure, by movement. What if the 5 children climbed into old Springlock suits, playing, pretending, not understanding the danger? What if the locks failed? What if all 5 died in separate incidents, or in one catastrophic mass failure? Their bodies would be inside the suits. The company would find them and panic, because explaining that 5 children died in their animatronics would destroy the business. So they cover it up. They seal the suits. They claim the children went missing. They let the cases go cold, and the children's spirits, traumatized by sudden horrific deaths, possess the suits they died in. They don't understand what happened. They just know they were at Freddy's and now they are dead and someone must be responsible. They see William, or they see Henry, or they see employees, and they assume those people killed them, because children need explanations. They need someone to blame, but it was just an accident. A horrible, preventable accident caused by unsafe technology and inadequate supervision. No one murdered them. They died because springlock animatronics are inherently dangerous and should never have been accessible to children. This interpretation fits all the evidence. It explains why we never see the murders. It explains the company's cover-up. It explains the children's confusion and misdirected anger, and it makes William's attempts to free them even more tragic. He's trying to release children who died because of technology he helped create. He's responsible, not through malice, but through innovation that had unforeseen consequences. That's guilt through negligence, through failure to anticipate danger, through creating something that killed people. But it's not murder, and the distinction matters. Let's talk about what this means for the future of FNAF. Security breach, help wanted, and the modern era of FNAF have moved past William. The new games focus on Vanny, the mimic, glitch trap, and threats that aren't directly William Afton. But William's legacy persists. He's referenced. He's present in the lore. He's still relevant despite being decades dead. If William was simply a villain, his continued presence would be repetitive. Just another evil person doing evil things. Boring. Predictable. But if William was innocent, if his story is more complicated, then his legacy becomes genuinely interesting. Because the new threats might be connected to him in unexpected ways. The mimic learned from observing behavior. What if it learned from observing William? Not William committing murders, but William desperately trying to save his children. What if the mimic's obsession with possession and consciousness came from mimicking William's experiments? What if modern Fazbear Entertainment's crimes are built on misunderstanding William's work? They found his research. They found his experiments with Remnant. And they interpreted it as instructions for creating possessed animatronics, for exploiting souls, for using supernatural phenomena for profit. But William's intent was never exploitation. It was salvation, and the company has perverted his work into something he would have hated. That creates compelling narrative tension. William's legacy being twisted into the opposite of what he intended. His attempts to save children being transformed into systems that harm them. And if the modern games eventually reveal this, if a future FNAF title confirms that William was innocent all along, it would recontextualize the entire franchise. Every game would need to be revisited. Every theory would need to be reconsidered. It would be one of the most dramatic revelations in gaming history. And it would cement FNAF as not just a horror franchise but a genuinely sophisticated narrative achievement. But that requires Scott to confirm it, and so far he hasn't. He's maintained ambiguity, deliberately. Which brings us to the final question. After examining all this evidence, after questioning every assumption, after investigating William Afton as thoroughly as possible, what's the actual answer? Is William Afton innocent? The honest answer is, we don't know for certain, and that's the point. Scott Cawthon has created a story where the evidence supports multiple interpretations, where the villain might be innocent, where the heroes might be wrong, where the simple narrative we've accepted for a decade might be completely backwards. The evidence doesn't definitively prove William killed those children, but it also doesn't definitively prove he didn't. What we can say with certainty is that the community's interpretation of William as an unambiguous child-murdering monster is not supported by direct evidence. It's based on assumptions, on interpretations of ambiguous minigames, on color coding that might mean nothing, on connecting dots that might not be connected. William Afton might be guilty of negligence, of creating dangerous technology, of failing to protect his children, of desperate experiments that crossed ethical lines, of making terrible decisions while trying to achieve impossible goals, but premeditated murder of multiple children. That's never been proven. That's never been shown explicitly. That's an interpretation, not a fact. And if there's reasonable doubt, if the evidence allows for innocence, then we have a responsibility to question the conviction we've handed down. In the real world, we have a principle: innocent until proven guilty. The burden of proof lies with the accuser. You must prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Apply that principle to William Afton. What proof do we have? Purple figures in minigames that might not be him. A spring Bonnie suit that multiple people could have worn. Dead children at locations he co-owned but didn't solely control. Possessed animatronics that attacked him when he tried to dismantle them. That's not proof beyond reasonable doubt. That's circumstantial evidence that supports multiple interpretations. In a court of law, William Afton would likely be acquitted of murder. There's simply not enough direct evidence to convict. But in the court of community opinion, he's been convicted, sentenced to be the franchise's ultimate villain. And that conviction has never been questioned, until now. This investigation doesn't prove William is innocent. But it proves he might be. And that possibility is enough to question everything we thought we knew. The real villain of Five Nights at Freddy's might not be William Afton. It might be Henry Emily, covering up his failures and blaming his partner. It might be Fazbear Entertainment, a corporation prioritizing profit over safety and covering up accidental deaths. It might be the Mimic, an AI that learned violence and has been killing for decades while everyone blamed William. It might be the community itself, constructing a simple narrative of good versus evil because we needed a monster to hate. Or it might be that FNAF doesn't have a single villain at all. That it's a story about tragedy, about good intentions gone wrong, about desperate people making terrible choices, about children dying in preventable accidents, about grief and guilt, and the impossible desire to undo death. That would make FNAF something far more sophisticated than we've given it credit for. Not a story about a child murderer getting his comeuppance, but a story about how we construct villains, how we need someone to blame, how we'd rather believe in evil than accept that sometimes horrible things happen without a malicious architect. William Afton has been FNAF's scapegoat, the person we blame for everything that goes wrong. Every death, every haunting, every tragedy somehow traces back to him in the community's interpretation. But scapegoating requires examining whether the blame is justified. And when we examine it honestly, critically, without assuming guilt from the beginning, the case against William falls apart. He's a man who lost his children, who tried desperately to bring them back, who created technology that was exploited by others, who attempted to free trapped souls and was murdered for it, who has been tortured for eternity based on accusations that were never proven. That's not a villain. That's a victim. And if we've been wrong about William Afton, if we've been blaming an innocent man for a decade, then what does that say about us? It says we're human. We make mistakes. We construct narratives that make sense to us. We accept interpretations that feel right without demanding rigorous proof. But it also means we can change. We can question. We can admit when the evidence doesn't support our conclusions. Five Nights at Freddy's is a franchise built on mystery, on hidden clues and ambiguous evidence and secrets that take years to uncover. Scott Cawthon has never given us simple answers. He's always challenged us to think deeper, to look closer, to question our assumptions. And maybe the biggest secret, the deepest mystery, the most important question has been hiding in plain sight all along. What if we've been wrong about who the villain is? What if the man we've called a monster was actually the only one trying to do the right thing? What if William Afton was never the villain at all? The evidence doesn't give us a definitive answer, but it gives us doubt, and doubt is enough to question a conviction. So perhaps the answer isn't whether William is innocent or guilty. Perhaps the answer is that FNAF is a story complex enough, sophisticated enough, carefully constructed enough that both interpretations are valid. A story where the villain might be the victim, where the victim might be the villain, where truth depends on perspective, on interpretation, on which pieces of evidence you weight most heavily. That's not a flaw in the storytelling. That's evidence of masterful narrative construction. Scott Cawthon has created a universe where we can have this conversation, where we can examine evidence for hours and reach different conclusions, where a character can be simultaneously guilty and innocent depending on how you interpret ambiguous clues, and whether William Afton is ultimately revealed to be innocent or guilty, whether future games confirm or deny this theory. The fact that we can construct a compelling case for his innocence using only canon evidence proves something important. FNAF is more than a horror game about haunted animatronics. It's a complex narrative about perspective, assumption, justice, and the stories we tell about tragedy. William Afton might be innocent. He might be guilty. He might be something in between. But what we can say with certainty is that the simple story we've been telling for a decade, the story of an evil child murderer getting his deserved punishment, is not the only story these games support. There's another story. One where a father loses everything and spends his life trying to fix it, where his attempts to save his children are misinterpreted as crimes, where he's murdered by spirits seeking misplaced revenge, where he suffers eternally for sins he didn't commit. That story fits the evidence just as well, maybe better, and that story, uncomfortable and tragic as it is, might be the story Scott Cawthon has been trying to tell all along. We just weren't ready to hear it, until now.